What do you mean, I set the price? Mr. Prospect, since you've been putting so much into life for so long, don't you think it's time you prepare to let life put something back into you? Did you put your own age in the blank? What does this have to do with closing a sale? So, what do you, the salesperson, do? What do you see? Do you, the salesperson, really believe what you are selling is for my benefit, or are you just trying to sell me so you will benefit? Is this pressure? Was his dentist practicing good dentistry or good selling? Is that fair enough? Does that make sense? That's what our goods or services will do, and that is what you want to have happen, isn't it? That removes the only obstacle between you and ownership of the product, doesn't it? Would you like me to ship this air, freight, or by truck? Do you have French cuff shirts? Do you know where I might find them? Besides, didn't you see me talking to this other clerk? Doyle, do you have a white suit? Am I able to motivate others? We'll get it examined by an inspector and we're both covered. Is that fair enough? As a reader, if there were a single cassette recording which teaches you how to train and use your voice, how to ask questions, how to tell stories, how to use your imagination, paint vivid word pictures, and make more sales, would you be interested in knowing about it? Wouldn't you? What size? Doyle, how long will it take me to get this suit? Well, Zig, you don't leave until 2 o'clock, do you? Oh, by the way, Doyle, do you have any French cuff shirts? Did you get your shirts? How do you like them? Zig, did you get your suit? How do you like it? Are you still at the same phone number? You do. Now, what does treat you right mean to me? When the evening was over, a reporter went to Charles Lawton and asked how he felt about having participated in such an event. What was his reaction to the old man's reading of the Bible? Is the bicycle for this little fellow here? Why do you want to make this sale? Is your heart as well as your head completely in the transaction? Do you really believe it's in your prospect's best interest to buy what you're selling? What would you have done? What kind of daddy would I have been to say, no, son, you can't even hold the ball. Now take it back. What else could a 3.5-year-old give his daddy but a part of himself? How much should we invest? How much more can we invest? How much does it cost? How much does that house cost? Sweetheart, how much does that house cost? Look at the size of this den, honey, and aren't those exposed beams gorgeous? How do you feel about it, honey? What could I say? Did this discourage her or dampen her enthusiasm? Now come on, you don't really think she would try to embarrass me into buying a beautiful home, do you? How long are we going to live in Dallas? How long? Honey, do you think we'll be here 30 years? I love Dallas. It's centrally located for my travels. I hate to move. We'll be here at least 30 years. But why do you ask about 30 years? Honey, if we live here just 30 years, how much does that $18,000 figure out per year? How much is that a month? How much is that a day? It comes to about $1.70 a day. But why do you ask all these questions? Honey, could I ask you one more question? Honey, would you give another $1.70 a day to have a happy wife instead of just a wife? Guess where we live? Did you buy the book because you were curious, knew the author, were looking for a miracle, or because you wanted to further your career by effectively making more sales or persuading others to take specific action? But guess what they kept teaching at the University of Pisa? A. How do you persuade people? And B. What is persuasion? Do you sell a pretty good product? Do you sell an exceptionally good product? Do you sell a product that solves a problem or problems? Do you feel you deserve a profit when you sell a product that solves a problem? Do you feel you deserve two profits when you sell two products that solve two problems? Have you been selling for as long as 1 year? If yes, do you still have all the money you earned in your last 12 months as a salesperson? Do you have customers whom you sold over a year ago who are still using and enjoying the benefits of what you sold to them at that time? If you answered yes, and in most cases you probably did, then the next question is, who was the biggest winner, you or the customer? Now, if the customer is the biggest winner, who ought to say thank you to whom at the conclusion of the transaction? Is the sales process something you do to somebody or something you do for somebody? How many clothes? How much floor space? How much car? How many TVs? How much food do you need? Do you have fine china? Do you have any with you? If she bought the china, which cost more than the cookware, which was too expensive and which she couldn't afford, was she lying when she said she didn't have the money? Interesting question, isn't it? What do you mean I've got to buy today? You're not just passing through town, are you? I mean, you are going to be here, aren't you? You're not closing your doors, are you? What's your hurry? Now, who is this elderly couple thus wed? Since you want it, can you think of any reason you should not, at this moment, treat you and your family as well as you deserve to be treated? Shall I ask the company to ship it as soon as possible, or would 2 weeks be better? Would you like to take it with you, or should we send it out? Why don't you go ahead and admit it? Was Paul Revere a minute person? What would you like to have happen on your next sales interview? You would like to make a sale, wouldn't you? What about the one after that? And the one after that? The point is clear, isn't it? How do you make the sale to the person you deal with next? Can you imagine? Can you imagine a 12-year-old saying to a prospect, "Now, Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, our market analysis reveals that the average sales price of the homes in this area for the past 12 months is $96,500. However, our projections convince me that the current trend of the market as well as the movement of the city will give us an average increase in value of 11% in this area for the next 9 years, which simply what is the commission? What's the commission? Can you imagine a 12-year-old spouting that kind of stuff and having a prospect sitting there saying, "Yeah, that's right, young man. I believe I'll buy that $96,500 house you showed me yesterday." It's not that the prospect wouldn't believe him, but there's an area of credibility which leaves something to be desired, does it not? In your trade area, what is your average commission on the sales you almost make? Are you a good people? If you don't have a prospect, how are you going to close? If you don't know how to make an appointment, how are you going to close? When all of these things are going for you, the question is not, will you succeed, but rather, when and how big will that success be? When should you close? What or when is too early? Is that fair enough, Mr. Prospect? How many times in the last 12 months have you admitted that you were wrong, that you made a mistake? If it's tough for you to admit you were wrong, how are you going to get your prospect to admit he was wrong, that he made a mistake? That will be even tougher, won't it? Why didn't you tell me the property was outside the city limits and I won't have to pay city taxes? Why didn't you tell me we could print on both sides of the paper? Would you give a salesman $100 for a product or service which in your mind you knew was worth no more than $50? Yes or no? Obviously, the answer is no, isn't it? When you negotiate with a prospect, do you honestly believe he will give you $100 for something which he definitely feels is worth only $50? Yes or no? Under those circumstances, would you give him $100 for a product you positively felt was worth only $50? Yes or no? Actually, that's a ridiculous question, isn't it? Suppose the salesman got emotional about it, sent you on a guilt trip, insisted that you ought to buy to help him, his family, or someone else. Then would you give him $100 for a product which you knew was worth only $50? The answer is still no, isn't it? The girl, tearful, explained that she was in love with the boy and couldn't mom do something? Well, daughter, what in the world happened? Why does this one cost almost twice as much? Well, friend, what is the one I just ordered made of? Friend, why didn't you tell me to begin with that the one I ordered is not all leather? Which one of the sofas do you think I bought? Or do you figure I walked out without buying anything? If he had told me the full story to begin with, would I have bought the sofa? Would I have bought the more expensive leather one? Would you buy from you? If I were calling on me and made that presentation, would I be able to persuade me to take action on the offer? The price is ridiculous. Trouble. Work. Worth it. The first thing you've got to do The first thing you've got to determine is whether the price really is the problem or is there another issue. If there were a way I could show you that the price is more than fair and the product is worth every dime we're asking, would you go ahead and take advantage of our offer today? Would you mind if I ask what that reason is? Let me ask you, Mr. Prospect, do you like the product? Mr. Prospect, wouldn't you agree that it's difficult to pay too much for something you really like? Wouldn't you agree that it's better to pay a little more than expected than a little less than you should? That makes sense, doesn't it? Do you know anyone who has some unused cosmetics at home in a drawer? Yes or no? So what happens? Wouldn't it have been better to have paid a little more than you expected instead of less than you should to get exactly what you wanted and needed? If you count satisfaction and personal pride, and you ladies know how much better you feel when you're all dolled up, then you really are getting a bargain when you invest in quality, aren't you? This is a bargain. Wouldn't it have been better to have paid the regular price and gotten your size and worn them for months to come? You can finish the story, can't you? Why settle for the get by when in the long run the good costs less? Mr. Prospect, if you could convince yourself that the price is more than fair, would you have any objection to going ahead with a decision today? Mr. Prospect, if you could convince yourself, don't ever say if I could convince you, because he's not interested in you convincing him of anything. That the price is more than fair, would you have any objection to going ahead with a yes decision today? Are you really interested in price, or is it cost you're concerned with? What do you mean, am I talking about price or cost? What is the difference? So, Mr. Prospect, may I ask you again, is it price that you're concerned with, or is it cost? Since you are obviously cost conscious, can you think of any reason you shouldn't immediately start enjoying the best, lowest possible cost? Since you are obviously cost conscious, can you think of any reason you shouldn't immediately start enjoying the lowest possible cost? Does this technique work? Ma'am, the price is too high. Let me ask you, ma'am, are you talking about price or cost? What do you mean? Ma'am, do you mind if I tell you a story to emphasize the point? I believe all of us want that. Wouldn't you agree? Wouldn't it be better to pay a fair price one time and be through with it than to go on paying those little costs you get from a product which is probably not as good as what you're looking at right now. Wouldn't it have been doubly unfortunate for everyone concerned had this couple, who obviously wanted the car, and Bill Egan, who obviously wanted the sale, been unable to get together because of the absence of sales skills and persuasion? Would you agree that, as a practical matter, a product is worth more? Would you agree that, as a practical matter, a product is worth what it can do for you and not what you have to pay for it? You do want something you can depend on for good service over the long haul, don't you, Mr. Prospect? And so I'll bet you're glad we made that decision, aren't you? Mr. Prospect, at XYZ Company, we decided many years ago that it would be easier to explain price one time than to apologize for poor quality or poor service forever. And I'll bet you are glad we made that decision, aren't you? And that's what you really want, isn't it? Well, suppose you forget us. How will we know? What kind? Regular? These are valleys, aren't they? They cost a lot of money, don't they? They cost a lot of money, don't they? What in the world is this guy doing shining shoes? Do you realize that's what some psychiatrists make? Could I ask you a question? Didn't I see you with an overnight bag when you sat down? Are you spending the night in St. Louis? Do you by any chance have another pair of shoes in that bag? Well, I suppose you want the shine. Why would you offer me the regular instead of the best? Won't the best give my shoes the best protection? Well, why didn't you offer me the best? Gloomy Gus, or should it now be broken record? How would you like for me to give you a few words which would double the number of best shines you sell? What are they? I repeat, if what you're selling is good, why would you hesitate to offer it to the public in an optimistic manner? Is that true? What's my problem, Zig? What are you talking about? Oh, you mean the fact that I'm cooking in a competitive set of cookware. Bill, let me ask you a question. How long have you been with the company? How many times have you seen a new and untrained person come into your organization? What about you? Are you convinced of the merits of your merchandise? Your failure is predestined, so why prolong the death rattle? How can you honestly feel the prospect is going to lose if you aren't winning by owning the product? After all, how much confidence do you have in someone who badmouths his wife, his city, his company, or any of the people associated with the company? Did I catch you at a bad time or busy time, or do you have 4 minutes to talk? Would you be freer to discuss this proposal at a later time, or would you prefer that I continue? Who sells whom? What in the world happened to you and my brother? What do you mean, what happened? Him mad at me? A nice guy like me? Well, why is he mad at me? Won't the government do something? Then guess what happens? Well, John, you're not trying to sell me something, are you? Makes you wonder who he thought he was and what he thought he was doing, doesn't it? You should be careful, shouldn't you? Do you sell real estate? So what do you do? Why didn't I think about this before? What would I do? How can I justify that? How do you really view the person you're dealing with across the counter? Is she someone you can make a buck by selling to, or does he represent a person with a problem which you can help solve? Are you really thoughtful and considerate of him, or is your main focus on making the sale and reaping the benefits for yourself? How do you see your relationship with your prospect? As you review this old boy's problems, the chances are excellent you feel good about your situation in life, don't you? What about the Red Cross? What about your neighbors? Won't the church make a contribution? Can't you at least get food stamps? Tell me, sir, in addition to those things, would there be any other reason you could not go ahead and protect the lives of your family by installing these smoke and fire detectors in your home? Mr. Ziglar, if you can't afford to repair your roof, Won't it be even more difficult after a few more rainstorms to afford the new furniture, the paint job, the new insulation in the attic, and still have to afford the new roof? What do you mean $10 to balance a tire? Mr. Prospect, if you can't afford $10 to balance a tire, then how will you be able to afford the greater expense of the new tire you're going to need much sooner? If you, working full time, cannot pay the premium, how will your family pay